Right, so today we are here at the Topkapi Palace. This is based in the Fatih district in Istanbul. Now, this was the royal residence of the Ottoman Empire between the years of 1478 to 1853. Topkapi Palace has been a museum ever since 1924 to the present day. And my favorite room over here by far is the Islamic relic room, where you see the relics of the prophets. The Topkapi Palace is a large museum and library in the east of the Fatih district of Istanbul in Turkey. It served as the administrative center of the Ottoman Empire and was the main residence of its sultans. Construction ordered by the Sultan Mehmet the Conqueror began in 1459, 6 years after the conquest of Constantinople. It was given the name Topkapi, meaning Cannon Gate, in the 19th century. The complex expanded over the centuries with major renovations after the 1509 earthquake and 1665 fire. The palace consists of 4 main courtyards and many smaller buildings. Female members of the Sultan's family lived in the harem, and leading state officials, including the Grand Vizier, held meetings in the Imperial Council building. After the end of the Ottoman Empire in 1923, a government decree transformed Topkapi into a museum. Turkey's Ministry of Culture and Tourism now administers the Topkapi Palace Museum. The palace complex has hundreds of rooms and chambers, but only the most important are accessible to the public. The museum collection includes Ottoman clothing, weapons, armory, miniatures, religious relics, and illuminated manuscripts such as the Topkapi manuscript. The Topkapi Palace forms a part of the historic areas of Istanbul, a group of sites in Istanbul that UNESCO recognized as a World Heritage Site in 1985. The very first time I came to Istanbul was in the year 2008 with my entire family, and it was the first time I entered into the Topkapi Palace. At that time, I wasn't so aware of history, especially Ottoman history, and there are many that portray the Ottomans as bad people. But luckily, later on in life, I realized the Ottomans were absolutely incredible, and they were a massive positive for the world. And I realized that they were religiously devoted, immensely just, and their empire was based on justice. And now, each time I walk through the Topkapi complex, I'm just contemplating on the mountainous, legendary personalities in the likes of Fatih Sultan Mehmet Han, Sultan Selim Han, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, and many others that walks through this magnificent complex, that from this very headquarters entered into 3 continents and 73 nations and achieved legendary greatness. But in spite of this formidable power, I often wonder at the extent of how beautiful their hearts must be. Because when a heart is beautiful, it manifests in the structures that you surround yourself in. And so when I look at the Topkapi Palace, even today, after several centuries, it looks as though it's in pristine condition. It looks as though it has newly been built. And I've been to many palaces across Europe, but the Topkapi Palace is by far the most distinguished, is by far the most impressive, is by far the most extraordinary. My favorite room in the Topkapi Palace is by far the Sacred Trusts room. This room holds many of the relics of prophets and of the companions of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It also has the sword of Prophet David or Dawood alayhi salam and the sword of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as his blessed companions. When the new Ottoman Sultan, Sultan Suleiman IV, arrives, he will hand over these sacred trusts to Imam Mahdi al-Islam in Konya. It is mentioned in a hadith by Prophet ﷺ in Jami' al-Saghir,
one Salim will come and will take the sacred trusts,
which indicates Sultan Selim I, who took the sacred trusts from the Abbasis in Egypt. And the second part of the hadith says,
Allah Salim will come and will hand over the sacred trusts,
which he will hand over to Imam Mahdi al-Islam in Konya. And this Sultan will be the 37th Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Selim IV. You can read more about this in the book written by Ayberk Effendi, The Lions of the Golden Apple. Now, Topkapi Palace has hundreds of rooms, and only a few of them are accessible. But even the few that are accessible, there are a lot of them. Like, you can spend quite easily, you can spend at least 4 hours, if not the whole day over here, if you're going through each of the rooms, each of the chambers, each of the courtyards. Now, when you get to the end of the Topkapi Palace, you get to see the fortress, as well as the Golden Horn view. So you get to see the Galata Tower from here, over here. And it looks magnificent because obviously, as I mentioned before, you have the view of the Sea of the Bosphorus, but then you also have the view of the Galata Tower as well. So it's a very hot day as well. So the way that this palace has been designed, you can feel a gentle breeze. So Istanbul can get really hot during the summer. So the way that they've designed it, it feels as though there's a natural air conditioner or a natural air conditioning over here, or a natural fan that's playing for you. So that's a good way to keep cool and everything. So right now we are in the Garden of the Lions. So you'll see lions over here, one there. And it's a vast space, so there's good places to sit down. Now, we went to some of the rooms, and one of the rooms had the Takht, which is the throne of the Sultan. So we saw the throne of the Sultan. We saw the Iftari Pavilion, and what's fascinating about that is it's covered with gold. And again, it's situated in a place where you get to see the view of the Bosphorus as well as the Golden Horn. So you just imagine how the sultans would have sat down and done this. I came here back in 2008, 14 years ago with my family, and that time I didn't really know much about the Ottoman Empire. The more you read about them, the more you understand how great they were. The achievements that they were able to accomplish is just remarkable. Now that I come over here, after all these years, and I came here last time in 2010, so now that I'm coming over here, I really appreciate it. Once you know more about this dynasty, and that's why I would actually recommend everyone to read a little bit about the Ottoman Empire if you can, and what their achievements were, how a dynasty of 624 years lasted, what they achieved, how they expanded, how they went into 3 different continents. Whether you are a fan of them or not, one of the great things about them is when you come over here, you see how incredible the architecture was. The people that were able to design the Topkapi Palace, for instance, well, one of the architects was Mimar Sinan, who is very famous for various different mosques that have been built and various different buildings that have been built in Istanbul. It's inspired by his design. So he was one of the architects of this palace. And they got the best of the best, the elite from the crop of the architects of their time to design this palace, and then also to do the interior design as well. So it's just marvelous. It's mesmerizing when you come over here and experience it. So that's why Topkapi Palace is a 10 out of 10. If you come to Istanbul, this is a must-see. Like, if you have 3 things to do over here in the city, I would highly recommend you to come to Topkapi Palace. It's one of the top 3 things that you can do. Like, if not the most important thing that you can do when you come to Istanbul itself. Like, just by coming over here, you can spend an entire day over here. So you get value for money. And I would obviously recommend that you get the museum pass so that you save money by coming over here. But this is a great way to get an introduction to Istanbul if you're coming here for the first time, because you get to understand the history. And this is not just any other city. This is a city that has like a lot of history. We are speaking about 2,000 years of history and beyond that. So this is one of the best centers to come to capture a large chunk, a large portion of that history. So with that said, like this video. Because the Topkapi Palace is so huge, you may not have enough time to go everywhere. Therefore, one of the suggestions I have for you is to check out the kitchen section of the Topkapi Palace, because there is an area where you can see where baklava was invented for the first time. Now, the image on the screen may not be so great due to bad lighting, but I had to show it to you. But do check it out if you're in the Topkapi Palace. In Arabic, the word harem means a holy place where not everyone is allowed to enter. It refers to private family life in Islamic countries. In the context of Ottoman palaces, harem was the private residence of the dynasty. It was forbidden to the public. The inscription above the door of the main entrance into the palace harem is from verse 53 of Ahzab Surah of the Quran, which says, "O believers, do not enter the house of the Prophet ﷺ without permission." The harem department of the Topkapi Palace was the living quarters of Sultan, the Sultan's mother, wives, children, and the siblings of the Sultans, as well as the maids and the black eunuchs who guarded the premises. Enderun was the educational institution for males who would work at the palace and government services. Likewise, harem was also an institution for training the women of the palace. The inscription above the entrance gate leading into the second courtyard dates back to 1586
and indicates that Sultan Murad III had expanded the harem. The gate was also referred to as the Gate of Girls due to being used by high-level women of the harem. The initial section of the harem, department of Topkapi Palace, were built alongside the Golden Road in the 15th century during the reign of Sultan Mehmet the Conqueror. In the second half of the 16th century, Suleiman the Magnificent's wife, Hurrem Sultan, moving to the harem from the old palace in Bayazid led to an increase in the number of buildings in the harem. Harem became fully institutionalized during the reign of Murad II. At this period, previously open-viewed and paved pathways gradually turned into closed courtyards. The chief architects of the period were Mimar Sinan and Daud Ah. The harem underwent many expansions during the reign of every subsequent sultan, and today includes nearly 300 rooms, 9 baths, 2 mosques, 1 hospital, 1 laundry room, and numerous dormitories. The 2-story masjid is adjacent to the harem wall and covered with plasters imitating the pattern of a stone and brick wall. Its niche, mihrab, is laid with the 16th century tiles from Iznik.